Matt Taibbi with us, the investigative reporter and columnist for Rolling Stone magazine, rollingstone.com. Jacob just got his new issue in the mail, brought it in to show us. Some of us subscribe. You can also read it online, rollingstone.com. Why isn't Wall Street in jail? Oh, thank you, Jacob. Here, I can wave it for the camera. Here you go. Justin Bieber on the cover. Who had some interesting things to say the other day. Anyhow, Matt Taibbi on the line with us. Matt, welcome.
How's it going, Tom?
Good. There is a story that's being sold right now. The Koch brothers and the Republicans are going to spend over $1 million to sell it in Wisconsin. And
right.
They're doing the same thing in Ohio right now. There's 40,000 people down at the state capitol. And that message is that the economy has been crashed by Democrats somehow wanting to give homes to poor people. And the consequence of that is that now the union workers are overpaid, and it's all the teachers' fault. And you've got a somewhat different story here in Rolling Stone this week.
Yeah, it's just amazing that they're coming out with this storyline. I actually kind of almost admire the chutzpah, to come out with that sort of propaganda. It's, the real story. What actually happened? What's so ironic about this is that what's happening with a lot of these state pension funds is that the pensions are going broke, or they're severely underfunded, precisely because a lot of these states were defrauded or were essentially victims of a sort of a widespread criminal fraud scheme that was underlying the financial crisis, which involved these banks selling mismarked, toxic mortgage-backed securities to state pension funds. So
right, they were rated AAA, just like federal treasuries, but they paid a whole lot more. So why not invest in them?
Right. I mean, what they actually were, they weren't. AAA means credit risk almost zero, and it implies that they're as safe as U.S. Treasuries. But the reality was that these banks were actually selling these pension funds. What they were selling was sort of sliced up and diced up subprime mortgage-backed securities. They were selling them, the home loans of urban poor people. And so these pensions naturally end up going broke, or they lose 40 or 50% of their value in some cases. And now the states can't pay the pensions and the other obligations to these public employees, and so now they're blaming the victims. They're saying that it's the teachers and the firefighters and the policemen who are collecting these pensions who are the problem, and they're targeting those pensions. It's a brilliant scheme, actually. And what's most incredible about it is Ohio, because in that case the governor Kasich, he was actually selling this stuff to the state of Ohio as a Lehman Brothers executive, and now he's turning around and pulling the trigger on these state employees.
Wait a minute, John Kasich, or Kasich, however you say it, the governor of Ohio, who right now is trying to blame the teachers union, was selling to the state of Ohio toxic assets.
He was a Lehman Brothers employee in the earlier part of the decade. And he was involved in getting the state of Ohio to invest something like $450 million in Lehman Brothers. And I believe a large part of that investment involved subprime-backed securities.
Amazing.
So the turnaround is incredible. And that to me is the most direct metaphor for the whole situation. It was actually a criminal fraud scheme where the victims were these pensioners, and then they're going to turn around and blame the pensioners.
Now, when Sweden had a banking crisis, and I think it was '98, they nationalized the banks. When the UK's banks fell apart, their biggest bank, Northern Rock, as I recall, they basically nationalized that. Screwed the stockholders and fired all the directors. When Reagan was president, and he deregulated the S&Ls in '82, and they went through a bubble and a boom and bust crash in '86. And he put Bill Seidman in charge of the Resolution Trust Corporation of fixing that. He basically nationalized the S&Ls, and he sent 2,000 people to jail. I mean, one of the most famous who didn't go to jail, of course, was Neil Bush with Silverado, because his daddy was, I think, a congressman or a CIA director or something at the time. But But, the people who were not related to the Bush family who were involved in that S&L fraud actually went to prison.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when this crash happened on the Bush administration, there was not a word about sending anybody to prison. Why?
It's an amazing thing. They've somehow managed to sell this story that a part of it is that very narrative that you talked about with the Koch brothers, that the crash was caused by government programs that ostensibly forced banks to lend to minority homeowners. Of course, this was not the case. The reality was that they just invented derivative instruments that made it possible for the banks to disguise subprime loans as AAA rated securities. So they you didn't have to force them. They were rushing to sell this stuff all over the place,
right,
and to make these loans. And somehow Wall Street escaped any blame for the crisis. And of course, there's another situation: is that in the 80s, I think the system wasn't as completely corrupted as it is now. And this is a lot of what the story I just wrote was about. But we have a revolving door situation now where the top officials in the SEC and the Department of Justice, they routinely leave government service after a couple of years, and they go and they take $3 or $4 million a year partnerships with the corporate defense firms that represent the banks. So they never go after these guys. It's kind of not done, and only in extreme and anomalous circumstances like the Bernie Madoff case do they ever do it. And I think that's what happened here.
So, wow. Have there been efforts in the past to break that revolving door, and are there any efforts underway right now?
No, there are no efforts underway right now. The situation's only gotten worse. One of the stories that I wrote about in my piece involved, the ultimate example of what the revolving door is all about. Back in the earlier part of the decade, an investigator named Gary Aguirre at the SEC, a sort of mid-level guy, wanted to investigate an insider trading case that involved John Mack, who's one of the most powerful people on Wall Street, is the current chairman of the board at Morgan Stanley. He was once the CEO there. When Aguirre went to his superiors to ask for permission to interview Mack about this case, he was told that he couldn't because Mack had, quote, powerful political connections. And when he pressed the matter further, he was fired. And the amazing thing about this is that subsequently, one of the people who fired Aguirre went on to work for the very firm that was representing Morgan Stanley, and the director of enforcement at the time also went on to a lucrative partnership that was connected to Morgan Stanley as well. So this is exactly the way the situation works. It's the very higher ups have personal relationships with these banks and their lawyers, and only the lower level guys are even interested in pursuing these cases.
We look at the Russian oligarchs and smugly laugh, and yet we're not that much different, are we, Matt Taibbi?
Well, no. I mean, I think that's the reality that I'm hearing from people who worked in the Justice Department and in the SEC, that it was like swimming uphill to pursue any case against any high-level people, and they just couldn't get these cases moving.
It's an amazing, detailed, shocking story. How Wall Street's crooks evaded jail is the headline, the front cover of Rolling Stone. Why isn't Wall Street in jail? Financial crooks brought down the world's economy, but the feds are doing more to protect them than to prosecute them. Matt Taibbi, thanks for being with us, Matt.
Thanks for having me on.
RollingStone.com.